I'm going to hide behind here. I'm a bit scared of this Lady Gaga stuff. So it's not much of a story, but it is all true. Last week, I went on a spiritual journey pilgrimage to Wanganui. It may not seem like an obvious place for a pilgrimage, but for me, that place has special significance. You see, it wasn't my first visit there. My family migrated there in 1990 when I was 15 years old from Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka's always been a bit of a mess of a place throughout my life. Even now, 4 years after our civil war ended, there are still a few messes that haven't been cleaned up yet. But in 1990, it was particularly messy. Apart from the civil war, we had a Khmer Rouge-style Marxist uprising. We had assassinations, abductions, bomb blasts, curfews, schools closing down. So my family decided to leave the wild east and go to the mild south. And it was, for me, I mean, I'm reminded of the New Zealand comedian Reuben Khan, who I saw many years later, and he was describing his family's migration from communist China to Masterton. And the way he describes it is, my family fled in mortal fear of certain death to Masterton. So, death or Masterton. Tell me about death again. And that's exactly how I felt about Wanganui. I mean, Colombo was a mess, but it was my home. I played cricket there. I had friends. But anyway, so I went to Wanganui, and I was put into the finest boarding school in the country, I was told, Wanganui Collegiate School. And yeah, it was fun times because I was a skinny kid with a pot belly, and I had a more ridiculous haircut than I do now, a bit of a afro-Jufro thing, and I didn't have this luxurious beard. I had bum fluff all over the place, and I know I probably spoke with a bit of an accent, but I'm certain I didn't sound like Apu from The Simpsons, but everyone at that school constantly repeated everything I did in Apu Simpson's voices, and it was, I mean, I don't know what Wanganui Collegiate's like now, but then it was full of farmer boys and rugby heads and rich kids, and who all took great delight in finding new and creative ways to mispronounce my name. So it was like, Shehan Karunatilaka, how you going there? And that was what I was greeted with every day. And I thought curry mancha, I didn't think it was a racial slur. It sounded like something you got in a McDonald's Happy Meal. It sounded like the Hamburglar, the curry mancha. I thought it was a term of endearment until I got onto the rugby field and they were like, pass it to the curry mancha. And I thought it was because of my athletic prowess. I was a bit of a slim Tui Gamala, but no, it wasn't the case. I got the ball and they'd all jump in and pummel me and stomp on my head. And so all fun stuff. So basically 1990, I remember doing two things in 1990, crying and masturbating. That was pretty much. It wasn't, not at the same time, obviously, and not even close to each other. That would be weird. But so those are my two activities. But I also was listening to my Walkman a lot. For those of you who don't know, Walkman's sort of like a iPod that can only store one album, and you can't do random. You can kind of skip, but it involves rewind. It's complicated technology. So I listened to my Walkman. 2 albums on that Walkman I listened to a lot. Sting's The Dream of the Blue Turtles and The Police, Every Breath You Take, the singles. Now this is pretty radical for a 15-year-old in 1990 where everyone was listening to MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice. To listen to a band that had broken up 7 years earlier and an album that was 5 years old, it wasn't exactly cool, but then again I was Shehan Karunatilaka, so cool wasn't really in there. But so I remember walking around a lot. We lived near the hospital. There were these big grounds and there were hills and trees, and I listened to my Walkman and walk around thinking these dark, depressed 15-year-old thoughts. And the main thought was, how the hell am I going to survive for 3 more years in this shitty town, in this awful school with these horrible people? How am I going to do this? And I remember asking the universe, I don't know if I believed in God at the time, but asking the universe, just give me a sign that this is going to pass and there's going to be something after this, anything. And the sign did come in the form of a book. And yes, it was an open book. In case you thought I forgot the topic of discussion tonight, it was an open book. It was open at the middle page, which will be why it'll become apparent in a bit. So I was sitting on this hill thinking my dark thoughts, and there in the leaves, I saw something that was shiny, and I rustled up the leaves, and in a plastic cover was a copy of Mayfair magazine. Now, for those of you who don't know, Mayfair is like a gentleman's magazine for those for whom Penthouse is a bit too highbrow. So I know in terms of signs from the God, this is not exactly Star of Bethlehem stuff, but for a 15-year-old, miserable 15-year-old, to find a girly mag hidden in the leaves where you're sitting there being depressed, it was proof that there was someone up there or down there who was looking after me. But this was the clincher. I mean, it had pictures of nice young ladies and stories about nice young ladies. That was fine. But it also had at the end an interview with a Mr. Gordon Matthew Sumner, who, better known as the former lead singer bass player of the Police, better known as Sting. Now, big deal, girly mag with a Sting interview. But this is pre-internet. I didn't know anything about the Police or Sting apart from the fact that their music made me feel funny and made me not feel so bad after all. And so this was like gold. And I remember I would visit that hill every day and read through it and look at the pictures. And I never found out who placed that magazine. One day I went there, the magazine was gone. But the point was this, out of those articles, I found out one thing, that there were 5 Police albums out in the world that I hadn't heard of. And, you know, I didn't have much pocket money, so I went to the Wanganui Library, and there was the Police's Synchronicity, their final album. I got that, but next to that was a shelf of music books, and there was an unauthorized biography of the Police. And so, now I'd like to say that things got better after that, but that's not true. I mean, the next 3 years, it was a miserable, horrible, agonizing, depressing time. But I did spend every moment I could in that library, and I wasn't just reading about the Police or listening to the Police. I read a book called, I read Lolita because Don't Stand So Close to Me, they mentioned that book by Nabokov. I read The Sheltering Sky because it was mentioned in Tea in the Sahara. I listened to Pink Floyd because Andy Summers talked about it in an interview. And basically, in those 3 years at Wanganui Collegiate, I discovered literature, rock and roll, depression, solitude, escapism, all the really great stuff. And so when I was invited to come to the Auckland Writers Festival after, back to New Zealand after almost a decade, I called up some friends or Facebooked some friends, and it wasn't all doom and gloom. I did make some friends at Wanganui Collegiate, and I said, let's do a road trip to Wanganui? And they said, sure, what do you want to do? And do you want to visit the school? Do you want to visit the bars? I said, yeah, I'll do all of that, but I also want to buy a copy of Mayfair magazine, climb up the hill behind the hospital, and bury it in the leaves. And I don't need to tell you the moral of the story. I'm here at the Auckland Writers Festival. You all know about the power of books to save your soul, to change your life, to give you something to live for, all that stuff. But I'd just like to tell you that the book that changes your life, it doesn't have to be Moby Dick or Midnight's Children or Love in the Time of Cholera. It could be a copy of Mayfair magazine with the pages stuck together, hidden amidst the leaves, on a hill in Wanganui. Thank you.